You're watching the weekly update with Clayton Wood, and this is the week of my anniversary. My lovely, wonderful wife, Danielle. 19 years of wedded bliss. It hasn't always been perfect and fun, but it has been awesome, and there's been a lot of lessons we've both learned growing together. We also have recorded some podcasts that have some of our main tips and themes that we've seen in marriage counseling that we do with and for others, and things that we've learned in our own marriage. That is available online on YouTube. Let's Fight for Good, I believe, is the name of the podcast. If you look it up that way, maybe I can put it in or my wife hopefully can put it in the comments for this post if you're interested. So this week, there's a bunch of things that have happened. Sometimes you have a very slow news week, and this one I'm somewhat choosing the things to focus on, given that there are many different things that are happening. Globally, the economic D-Day that was promised by Trump against Iran is still only somewhat happening, and some of that framework of what's going to happen there, we're just still waiting to see the extent to which fake allies like Turkey and Pakistan and enemies like China, and then I don't know how to describe them, medium countries like India will be treated in this ongoing battle to clamp down. We just signed some deals with India around security issues. I believe Javelin missiles going to them now. They're a huge weapons importer. We have hammered out some pretty sweet trade deals with India. China, I'm going to talk some about Canada and the Canadian trade deal, but you can't understand the Canadian trade deal without understanding China is the center of all of it. China is the center of Trump's trade war, will continue to be the center of Trump's trade war, is the reason that we set off the entire rounds and rounds of tariffs. I'm going to take a little detour here to give you guys a little bit of history, a little bit of my speculation. In Trump's first term, he secured a fairly remarkable trade deal with China. It was very clear that she was kind of surprised by the force with which Trump came in and insisted on upending the trade regime that was in place. Okay, so Donald Trump was not expected to win and was not the person who everyone anticipated being president when he announced coming down the escalator. China certainly wasn't hoping he was going to win. And Trump came in as a man focused on money and focused on deals. And so he hammered out quite a deal with China. And China, I believe, in Trump's first term, was incapable of fulfilling the deal they signed. Now, some of the reason I believe that, it requires a decently deep dive by you, dear listener, into the economic conditions of that time period, 2016 to 2020. Learn more about what happened with Evergrande and the collapse of various construction, real estate, and banking consortiums in China. But the easy way to say it is that the books were cooked, and Premier Xi could not allow for that information to come out in the first term. So they had signed a deal where China was obligated to buy a bunch of American things. Trying to get to a perfect trade balance with China is somewhat laughable. I say that just because of the absurdity of the number of imports that we see at every low-cost center that we have. a Dollar Tree, a Dollar General, a Walmart. You pick up something that costs $3 or $4, and it is almost a certainty that on the back somewhere, wherever there's a stamp, it will say "Made in China." It's been the case for a long time. Uh, Reversing, a trade imbalance with China was going to be almost impossible. China had some durable uh, advantages that they had built up through trade practices that are supposed to be illegal under international law, but that the United States sat around and did nothing when they violated international law. So, for example, they would uh, have an office chair group that they, as a government, would give enough money to that that office chair group could sell office chairs at a price where every single time they sold a chair, they lost money. And the Chinese central government could give them money so that they could dump office chairs for a year or two until the office chair manufacturers in the United States closed because they weren't able to compete with the dumping that China was doing. And then once China's the only game in town, they have a monopoly, then they can raise prices again. So that had been going on for a long time. Theft of intellectual property had been going on for a long time, continues to go on. And China, in that first uh, term of Trump's presidency, hadn't yet pulled some of their cards out, like rare earths monopoly that they got again through dumping by subsidizing the rare earth mining, such that the only rare earth mine that we had in the United States closed because it couldn't remain open because of how much China flooded the market with cheap rare earths and made it impossible for them to make money. We should have, at that point, made that a military operation rather than a market based operation, but we did not. And it closed, and we were way behind. Here's what happened, folks. There was one thing in that trade agreement that allowed Xi to get out of buying the things that I believe economically he couldn't buy. That thing, force majeure, an act of God or an act of scientists. In Wuhan, China, suddenly the people who illegally were funding gain of function research at EcoHealth Alliance under Fauci's watch saw that a virus escaped an accident. China lied about it to the World Health Organization, lied about it until it spread enough to create a pandemic. Somehow the virus that was released turns out to be one of the only viruses that could cause a global pandemic and that would kill tons of old people but would not kill children. Interesting, given that China cannot afford to lose children with their economy, but desperately needed to shed older people. Now, the official numbers from China don't look like that many people died, but I don't believe they're official numbers at all. China is such a black box, has such complete control over their social media and their internet and their data that not only are they cooking the books economically, but there are very credible arguments that they are lying about their population numbers on a scale of over 100 million people. Over 100 million people. Early on in the COVID epidemic, a scientist came forward with information about the truth, and he was picked up and he disappeared, and no one's ever heard about him since. All of that to say, we have an upcoming trade summit at the end of September. Not the very end of September, but third week, I think 21st or something like that. And it will be very interesting to see what happens. I thought that the first summit was going to be a big deal in China when Trump went to China. It really wasn't. Not much happened then. Something big is happening in the future. Pivoting from China to Iran, China has still tremendous leverage over Iran because they were buying tons of the oil from Iran, mostly through ship-to-ship transfer outside Malaysia. That continued to allow China to have their teapot refineries going. A couple of things have happened. One, it seems clear to me, now this is supposition, it is not official. I don't have receipts on this. It seems clear to me that Trump allowed some Iranian oil to continue to flow to that system back channel with Xi. And I say that because we could have stopped every stinking boat if we wanted to. That's very clear. And we did not. And I don't think that they were sneaking by us. But also, we didn't announce what we were doing. But China continued to get some Iranian oil. Iran continued to get some money from China. China has stopped using as much oil. Now, how could they have done that? How could China stop using as much oil? Part of the reason that China was able to use less oil is because they have been transitioning in lots of ways. Electric cars, BYD, they invested a ton in building a vertically integrated car company with incredible battery technology that is far cheaper to build now, thanks to Chinese governmental subsidy and intervention early, than anything that we can make in the United States, anything that any European car manufacturer can make. I was kind of rooting just for there to be options on the market for some Indian intervention, Tata Motors and Modi and some of the other billionaires in India to come up with some cheap car options. But so far, it looks like China is the runaway leader now in the next generation of electric vehicles. They might not need as much oil, but the number one reason that we didn't see as big an oil spike as you probably would have expected with the Strait of Hormuz closed is that China didn't replace like for like with the same amount of oil that they had been using. They just used a lot less oil. But part of the reason for that is that they're not sending nearly as much plastic stuff, garbage, TikTok or TikToks. What are they called? Tchotchkes, not TikToks. They are sending that too. Little plastic things, little toys, little things that my kids always ask for and say, "Dad, look at what a good deal this is." And if they get 2 or 3 hours of play out of it before it breaks, I suppose as compared to a movie ticket, it is a pretty good deal. But the little molded plastic stuff that's sent over is down 17%, which is pretty dramatic from China coming across the ocean to the United States. And so they don't need as much oil, they don't use as much oil, and we don't have as much pain at the pump. We are still moving towards a midterm. I think a lot of the forecasters are getting the midterm wrong. I think that the Republican candidate in Michigan is going to win that Senate seat. Uh, yeah, I believe that's going to happen. I believe we're plus one in the Senate. Plus one in the Senate. We Republicans, yes, I'm a Republican. If you're watching and you're going, "Oh, I had no idea. I'm so disappointed." Sorry, you're disappointed. I'm a Republican. I don't think that God is on the side of Republicans, but I think that in our current environment, particularly around issues like murdering babies, that Republicans are on the side of God when it comes to several very important moral issues that aren't even close. Castrating children who are 7 is wicked and horrific and awful, and people who support it are broken and demonized, and yeah, can't support any of them. People who support third trimester elective abortions are vile, evil people, can't support them either. So anyway, when I say "are," it is because I think of myself as part of a group who wants to see the Constitution followed and who want to see only citizens voting, and who wants to see people voting with verification that they're not dead, and things like that. So I think that but the midterms are looming. The generic ballots, the generic polling data looks really dark for Republicans. I think it's overblown. I think it's overblown. I think actually our polling is very stupid. Now, we're less than 15 minutes in. We're about halfway through. But buckle up, guys. I'm about to brag. The Saturday before this last presidential election, it's still up, it's still available. I didn't bet on Kalshi. I don't believe in gambling. I didn't bet on anything. But if you had put money on what I said, you would have made a ton of money. That I predicted the Saturday before the Tuesday election, every single state that Trump would win. Again, it's still up. You can look it up. It sounds like quite a brag. It happened. But the reason that it happened is because I wasn't relying on polling at all. In fact, there weren't that many states that were in doubt. Oh, California was going to go to Kamala Harris. That happened. Tennessee was going to go to Donald Trump. Didn't look at anything about Tennessee, didn't care to or need to. There's only a handful of states that mattered. And then with those states, you could look at publicly available information that they put out about the early voting numbers. And once you saw the early voting numbers that they had posted by Saturday, it was very clear where a bunch of those states were going. Some of the time that went against what the polling was saying. In the case of Nevada, particularly, I could not understand why a brilliant man who had gotten every single pick right for, I don't know, something ridiculous like 12 cycles or something, kept saying that Nevada was going for Harris. I didn't see it in the numbers, so I emailed him several times, and he was very nice. And he just said, "You don't know Nevada," and I do. And I tried to ask if he would explain the math, and he told me, leave me alone, basically. And he said, let's talk after the election. And he was gracious enough to send a reply afterwards saying, well, you were right and I was wrong, which was probably the highlight of all of my political prognostication I'll ever have around that. But the reason I'm bringing all of that up in this weekly update is this. The polling that you're seeing is mostly garbage. It's mostly garbage. The fact that a lot of people in California hate Trump's guts doesn't have anything to do with who's going to be in charge of Congress. It doesn't have anything to do with who's going to be in charge of the Senate. It's not important. It's not relevant. It's the same for New York. It's the same. I mean, what matters is less than 30 total congressional races. What matters is a handful of Senate races. That's it. That's it. It explains too why Trump is constrained from doing some things and why he's doing other things. I am the executive director of Wares Valley Ranch. If you live in East Tennessee, we would love to sell you some of our delicious beef. Ryan McCaffrey's the head of our horse program. He does a great job. At some point, I hope that you'll get to watch a beautiful video of our horses and our cows and the sheep and them rotating through pastures that are healthy and wonderful. It's great. It's great. I don't know a ton about ag policy. I don't know a ton about ranching. I don't know a ton about beef or beef prices. What I do know that seems pretty obvious is that the United States engages in some level of economic protectionism around ranching, around beef farming. And cattlemen largely supported Donald Trump. Cattlemen also were very dismayed in this last week when Donald Trump announced that he was going to allow the importation of a bunch of beef. Now, did the government buy a bunch of beef and now we're sending it to all these people who are on welfare and it's changing? No. The government stopped some of the price protection and price controls that keep out cheaper beef from other countries. Okay? I want to just say that again because it's so hilarious to me when people act like, Clayton, I'm opposed entirely to socialism and the government buying beef and moving it around. Guys, the government is keeping you from buying cheap beef. They're doing it because some of the beef overseas doesn't have the same health and safety regulations. That's a fact. They're doing it because some of that beef is made in ways that we don't think are great. That's a fact. But we're mostly doing it to protect our domestic industry. And in ag specifically, everybody does it. Canada's been doing it forever. Canada does it with milk, dairy. France has been doing it forever. I had arguments in the 2001 and 2 era about GATT and World and WTO and French cheese and French wine industry and why economic protectionism is happening for these countries. So Trump brought in so much beef, he's going to bankrupt cattle farmers. That is also, it's not true. It's not true. The supply's down. The herds are smaller. The herds are smaller primarily because of drought, that increase feed prices. And during drought periods, cattlemen sell off their cows and they don't carry as many cows. And all of that had cumulative impact. We have a very low, small herd size in the United States currently. That means, scarcity. Everybody understands some basic economics. Something that has consistent demand, lower supply, price goes up. Now we're getting dumped by all these cows from overseas. Look, it is not massive. It's not bankrupting anyone. It will depress prices. Yeah, it'll depress prices from ridiculous prices, absurd prices, prices that I don't know about you guys who are watching. I don't get to eat steak as much as I'd like. Not even close, not even kind of close. And the reason is I can't afford it. I can't afford to eat steak hardly at all. Okay. Because steak costs an insane amount right now. And I'm not angry at cattlemen saying you should sell me steak for less money than you. Okay. But the fact is, there are cheaper beef products available from overseas, and we're bringing them in. And here's the reason we're bringing them in so that before the election, Donald Trump can say, you grilled some hamburgers when you were watching your football. And it wasn't that bad, right? Hamburger prices are down from when Biden was president. That's it. That's the whole reason. That's it. But it led to a hue and cry, outrage, whining, crying. I'm a cattleman. I voted for Trump. He's not doing economic protectionism and providing me with corporate wealth or governmental intervention and welfare for my entire life. Okay, I'm a free market guy, generally speaking. But here's the part that I totally believe in. The government needs to get out of the regulation of everything. The regulatory state is massive and absurd and often was created by lobbyists to keep out competition, to punish the little guy and protect the big guy who bought the smart lawyers, who bought some politicians, and the ones they didn't buy, they were able to manipulate and pass through bills that protected them. We have 4 big meat packers in America. Again, this is not my primary area of expertise, but I know enough to know I really don't like it. I don't like 4 major packers being the only ones. I don't like their foreign ownership. I don't like the fact that you can have 500 cows that you send to be processed, and the cow you get back isn't your cow that you sent in to get processed. That's ridiculous. That's gross. There's no point in doing something right in terms of antibiotics, in terms of how you finish and feed the cow, if you're just going to get back whatever random cow they send you. The process as it exists now is broken. The way to make it better is something that Trump announced today. Breaking news. Dun, 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 dun. Trump said, hey, I've been hearing a lot about this. I've been hearing a lot of complaints. And people are mad, and we have 4 packers, and it's not a good situation. And we need to make it easier for farmers to sell their own food. Yes. Amen. That's what we need. People need to be able to sell their own food. Caveat emptor. What about cyclosporidia? Yeah. Also, by the way, that spread all across our country because of all the monopolies we have. It got so bad because couldn't figure out who's supplying it, and is it at every Taco Bell or just some, and etc. And the reason, again, is because we had a consolidation where there's one supplier who gets a problem, and it's all of a sudden it makes everybody sick. You should be able to buy cows locally from local farmers, and they shouldn't have to go through the same process as somebody who wants to ship cows around the world. Okay, partly too because you don't have to preserve stuff in the same way if it's not going to be in a cycle where it's from the time it's killed to the time it's served is weeks or months. Doesn't have to be that way. What we need is to make clear distinctions, and the federal government should have very limited roles, if any roles, in telling a Tennessee cattle farmer what they can do in terms of processing the cows that they grew to sell to people in Tennessee. Oh, Clayton, I thought you're a constitutional lawyer. What about that interstate commerce? Yes. Right? Think about what I said. A Tennessee farmer with a Tennessee cow, having it processed in Tennessee to sell to someone who lives in Tennessee, the federal government should butt out. It should leave it alone. Well, then it's just going to be chaos. It's going to be crazy. I don't think so. I don't think so. There is something called the invisible hand of the market. And I don't think you're going to see a bunch of people getting poisoned by horribly shoddy run operations because they wouldn't exist. They couldn't stay open. So the government needs to get out of the way. The government needs to lower the regulation. But if you're trying to figure out what happened there, what happened is simple. Trump wanted a win where people could buy cheap hamburger. And that's what's happening. It's not about country clubs. It's not about that beef. Because, by the way, people are still bringing Wagyu in from Japan, okay? The people who are flipping the LA Lakers for an extra $2 billion are not worried about the cost of steaks, okay? They're getting good steaks. But for the guy who's trying to go to Costco and make a couple patties so he can enjoy the football game, that guy is hammered right now, and Trump's trying to give him some relief before the midterms for political reasons. That's what's happening. Canada. Got to talk about it. Canada is led by a moron, very well-educated moron, a pretty skilled public speaking moron. Why, Clayton, do you keep calling him a moron? Because he's believing in socialism, a failed economic policy that has caused more pain and more horrific consequences for the last 100 years. Well, it hasn't caused as much as communism. That's true. It hasn't caused as much as communism. It's caused a lower level of pain than communism. Communism killed over 100 million people. Socialism just tanked the Canadian economy and made it terrible ever since the socialists took power in Canada. The difference in the spending power of Americans versus Canada is dramatic. And if Canadians sat around and thought about the government illegally stopping and seizing bank accounts from people because of their legal protest of overreach, you think we're overreaching? That's it. We're going to take your bank account. If people thought about the authoritarian freaks in charge of Canada who have created a welfare state full of parasitic people who do nothing except leech off the hard workers, then I think you'd already have Albertan independence. Instead, it's a much slower move toward that. And Donald Trump's incessant trolling of Canada has led to the popularity of the Canadian leadership. It's bolstered it a lot. Hey guys, we're under attack. Let's all rally behind our leader. That's frustrating to me. We should already have a trade deal with Canada. And Canadian people should be able to look at their leader and say, why are you screwing up our economy? They were supposed to be selling oil and gas to China. They can't. It's because they got blocked by the First Nations people having a lawsuit. And the government is so pathetic that it just rolled over and did nothing. This is a terrible government that does terribly economically, and they were about at the finish line on an excellent trade deal for them, for Canada. It would have been a really good deal. They would have made a lot more money, and the people would have been really happy. And Carney cut off his nose to spite his face and said, we'll show you, Donald Trump, this is a war. This stalemate is a war, and we will win. We will fight, and we will win. It is moronic. No, you won't. You're going to lose. Lake Ontario becoming Lake America or whatever. I mean, I'm surprised at this point he didn't name it Lake Trump or, Lake Hockey Stinks or something like that. I mean, this is all just back and forth trolling, and the serious issues are there. And the primary issue that existed here is that Canada wanted to continue to allow China to use them to route metal through Canada that China couldn't send to the United States, and to pretend that it's Canadian metal. That's it. That's what killed the deal. That is what killed the deal. And it should have killed the deal. And Carney thinks that he can threaten the United States, that he's going to replace us with China. Go ahead, try it. I believe that there's tons of evidence. Part of it is actually through examining the demographics, that China's economy is not doing great. And China cannot rescue Canada. It can't. It won't. It's happy to take huge stakes in natural resources it doesn't have. But China cannot rescue Canada, and it cannot pick up the 70% of their exports that come to the United States. If Donald Trump wants to make Canada feel economic pain, he can and he will. And they will be in a terrible position. And it's the fault of their moronic leadership. So, Canada, the blockade is somewhat tightening with Iran. There's more news coming out of Iran. We are starving. We want peace. We don't. Okay, it's propaganda at this point. The IRGC needs to be pushed to the point of collapse. That can happen if the UAE, Turkey, Pakistan, India, and China all said, you're cut off. It would collapse within a month or so. I mean, they just don't have a lot of reserves, and they'd be eating the seed corn, to be Appalachian about it, until they were done, until they're down to sawdust and chewing on shoes, if they actually get cut off. So that's a summary of what's happening there. There was a tragic glacial collapse. The glacial collapse pushed down and caused tremendous destruction. It was apocalyptic to watch. It looked like AI. It looked like something that is not real, just because of how devastating it was. And it was real. It is sad. And the response amongst many on the left here in America, and British MP, etc. I mean, Europe and America have the same oikophobia, where people hate their homeland and hate their culture, and demonstrate that to show that they're really elite. I'm so much better than others that I hate my country, is part of their sad, disgusting replacement religion. And so what you saw over and over again with that is you saw people saying that climate change is what caused this in Nepal. Now, these are people who don't realize that these were happening back in the early 80s. They never blamed China as a culprit for climate change, even though all of the gains made since before Al Gore wrote his first book of the United States and Europe spending hundreds of billions of dollars to try to lower our carbon footprint have been completely wiped out by the increased carbon output of China. China and India rocketing up in their output, just as America and Europe is tamping things down at great expense. All of the IPCC, we're all going to fly in private jets and shake each other's hand and announce we have a big climate deal. It's worthless. It's worse than just slacktivism, because they're pretending that they're solving a problem that they're not taking seriously at all. If you actually believe what they do about AGW, which I'll be blunt and say I don't believe that they have enough data to make the pronouncements that they make. If you actually believed it, then you should be even more outraged. Thunberg should be, how dare they, more, because they left China and India out. You can't leave China and India out and have any kind of a real deal. What should Christians do? Someone pushed back on Facebook and asked me what Christians should do about stewardship. And the number one thing I can tell you is you should be pro-nuke power. You should be pro-nuke power. It is the future of energy. We need more energy with recycling, which we should have in America at a massively higher level than exists in any part of our country now. It's the future. It's what you should be for. It's what you should promote. And I do believe in taking care of the earth. But what happened again and again after this giant, so there was a glacier, the glacier collapsed. As the glacier collapsed, it sent massive amounts of mud and water that had been dammed up and it rushed down a narrow valley that has had repeated times that they've had these big events, mud rock slides, for my entire life. It's happened several times, but this happened in an apocalyptic way. There's over 1,000 people missing. The death toll is in the hundreds and will continue to climb. And it just wiped out entire towns. Uh, there's still more than 40 glacial lakes above that haven't fallen, but that they think need to be watched. This is something that is going to continue to happen. Being on a river that's coming off of a glacial field that is warming and collapsing is not a great idea. It's not a great plan. And there are infrastructure things that could be done, perhaps by China and Tibet, which they dominate illegally. Uh, Seems like he's pretty anti-China. Yeah, well, I see them doing a lot of things that are terrible. But yeah, overall, Nepal and Tibet are not in a position to build the type of robust infrastructure you would have to have for anything that you build to survive this kind of uh, natural dam collapse and glacial collapse. So what you see again, though, is just the climate cult that says this is our fault. It's America's fault that people in Nepal are suffering. They are obsessed with self hatred and self flagellation, and it is the mark of enlightenment in their religion to blame everything on us and nothing, no matter how much it's actually caused, on others. So, China, for instance, if you believe that global warming is to blame, uh, China, not only who controls Tibet, but China, who is just pumping massive amounts into the atmosphere, uh, should definitely be mentioned in the messages that our congresswoman in Arizona is saying America is to blame for this glacial melt in uh, in Nepal. Uh, where are we as a country right now? We're headed to midterms. We have some looming trade deals that need to happen. We have some inflation issues. We have some pressure. I would love to be able to refinance my house. I was hoping that rates are coming down. Doesn't look like they are. Our economy is not in horrible shape by any means, but our economy is separating out increasingly. And people who don't, okay, I'll say this: if you have $1 million and or more in the stock market, you're not understanding most Americans in terms of their negative feelings about the economy. There's a huge split right now. Everything's bifurcated between owners, asset class people who are getting richer and richer and richer and richer, and whose gains in wealth are outpacing inflation, and people who are not owners, people who are renters, people who don't own a bunch of stocks, people who didn't invest early in Bitcoin, and they are seeing that their purchasing powers continue to go down. They are feeling hopeless about ever being able to buy a house, and they are feeling basically increasingly negative about economic opportunities in the United States of America. That's contributing to two different groups, both of which are very broken: the woke left, the democratic socialists, who want redistribution, who want to shake down the rich people, who want to confiscate all their money, not realizing that our federal government could waste all of the money that every rich person has in America within a year or two. And then the woke right, who are still in the similar, they're similarly moronic and racist and wicked, and they also view themselves as victims who have significant grievance. But yeah, I think the woke right and the woke left to me are somewhat indistinguishable. I guess generally the woke left is more female and non-binary and trans and pretty openly mentally ill as a group, pro-terrorism and pro-Hamas. And the woke right is more whiny, entitled, grievance-mongering males, uh, often more like a racist white guys, I guess, as a group. But yeah, also racist, also evil, and also I think somewhat redistributionist, maybe through like a fascist regime or a dictatorship. Not sure. Try to avoid watching much of any of them. I'm not watching Piker or Fuentes, but I will say that the reason that animates them, the gasoline to their fire, is a real challenge in the economy for those who don't own anything and who are continuing to get poorer and see their wages not keep up with inflation. So they fall further and further behind. Uh, Last week, I talked about gratitude. I want to end today by talking about empathy. Suicidal empathy it exists, and toxic empathy exists, and evil, horrible, broken people saying that they identify with Lindsay Clancy, and they were pretty close to killing their kids too. Don't trust them to babysit your kids, by the way. They're nuts, and they're letting you know that. But Satan's a judo expert. And you can easily get to a point where you go, look at those freaks, look at those weirdos, look at all these broken people, and not have any compassion at all. Look at those monsters, look at those others. There's only two types of people in this world. There's you brothers and sisters who know Jesus and who are rescued and redeemed by his grace. And there's the people who haven't been, who need to be. And we're called to love all of them. So, as you look at people who are lashing out in anger, I love to think about that story. I don't know if you know the story. Is it Aesop's Fables? It might be. I can almost picture the picture book that I read when I was really little, 2 or 3. But with the lion with the thorn in his paw, the little mouse is helping him, and then he helps the mouse later. Think about the fact that hurting people hurt people. When you look at someone who's lashing out, maybe the reason that they're so angry is because they're racked with guilt over the fact that they murdered their baby. Maybe the reason that they're so angry at their parents is because they can't face the truth that they've squandered a lot of their adult life and they've played a victim instead of recognizing that they're a villain. And it's such an existential threat to everything they've built up in their self-concept that they'd rather cut off their parents than admit the truth to themselves. Again, it's very easy to look in those pictures and to say, yeah, I'm not going to be a person with toxic empathy. I'm not going to jump down in the pit with the person who's full of despair or rage or hate. And I think that's wise, actually. Don't jump in the pit with them. Don't try to feel what they're feeling when they're crazy. But don't become dispassionate. Don't become disconnected. Don't cut yourself off from caring. Look at them in their pain and recognize it. See that they're hurting. See that they need love. And pray for ways that you can demonstrate it in word and in deed. This is a lost, broken, dying world. We need a savior. I'm praying for opportunities to share light. I am thankful. I thought that Dolly Parton was a fantastic songwriter, a fantastic singer, and an absolute icon. I thought her theology was pretty terrible, but she wasn't the pastor of my church. She was a philanthropist. She was generous in a way that most celebrities are not. She didn't forget where she came from. She was a story of success coming up from poverty. And she was iconic in that she was not known for the things she was against. She was known for the things she was for. And the primary thing she talked about a lot was love. Now, again, I'm not defending Dolly in every statement she ever made. But I am saying that when I heard people very foolishly say that they know where Dolly Parton is today and they don't think she's in heaven, I thought, you're a Pharisee and an idiot. I don't know where Dolly Parton is. They don't either. I do know that she was surrounded by people who loved Jesus, and she professed to love Jesus herself. And I hope that she is with him now. That's the hope I have for all those who are around me. It is way above my pay grade to know when someone is lost or found. Some people, if they died right now, and I'm not wishing death on anyone, but I would think of the example of someone like Johnny Erickson Tata. I would have not a moment of hesitation in saying I know where they are because I've heard them credibly share their testimony of how they moved from death to life, how God rescued them, how he became their Lord and Savior. There's a lot of other people I've never heard that from. There's a lot of other people where I'm praying that they get saved. But when we look at this world, when we look at people who pass, it's not helpful, in my view, to eulogize people by speculating about things we can't know. Dolly Parton went into Vanderbilt Hospital knowing that she had significant, massive health issues. She was surrounded by people who know Jesus and love him, and she professed she did too. Again, so Clayton, you're saying you know Dolly's a Christian. What about this thing she said? I don't, and I'm not defending everything she's ever said. But I'm saying when the world sees someone who's known for being kind and loving, who's known for being generous, for people to immediately say, America's universalist, is idiotic. It's a terrible witness. It's stupid and foolish. It's unwise the way that people have spoken about that. This has become a very long weekly update. Thanks for listening. You got my PS Dolly rant, and it's not just because she's Sevier County's most famous citizen, but it is because I think a watching world needs love, not hate, needs kindness more than it needs judgment. And we should have the discernment to know the things that we can say with confidence and the things that we can't. God bless you. Thanks for watching.